The summer I turned 21 arrived quietly, like it didn't want to be noticed. The heat settled into the walls of our old house, making the paint smell faintly sweet and tired, and every afternoon the ceiling fan clicked in a rhythm I'd grown up with. Nothing about that season felt special at first. I was home from college, sleeping in my childhood room, pretending I hadn't changed as much as I knew I had. Dad left early most mornings. The sound of his truck pulling out of the driveway had always been my unofficial alarm clock. That day was no different, except I noticed the silence afterward. No radio drifting back through the open window. No second engine starting. I lay there longer than usual, staring at the small crack in the ceiling I'd memorized years ago, wondering why my chest felt tight for no clear reason. That was when I heard footsteps downstairs. Slow, deliberate, not Dad's. I told myself it was nothing. The house had always made noises, wood expanding, pipes complaining, but this felt intentional. Like someone moving carefully. When I finally got up, the hallway smelled like coffee. Fresh, stronger than what Dad usually made. And then I saw him. Evan stood in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, sunlight catching the silver at his temples. Dad's friend. His longest one. I'd known Evan since I was a kid. Barbecues, late-night card games, the way he laughed too loudly at Dad's bad jokes. He was a permanent fixture in my childhood memories, always hovering at the edge of family life without ever fully stepping into it. Morning, he said, looking up like he belonged there. My mouth went dry. I told myself I was imagining the way my pulse jumped. I told myself it was just surprise. But there was something different about him standing alone in our kitchen, wearing comfort like a second skin. Dad said I could stay a few days, Evan added, almost casually. Work's got me in town. Dad hadn't mentioned that. I nodded, suddenly too aware of my bare feet on the cool tile, the thinness of my t-shirt, the way Evan's eyes flicked, just briefly, before returning to my face. That glance felt heavier than it should have. Everything after that felt suspended in a strange calm. Breakfast passed with easy conversation. Evan asked about school, about my plans, about whether I was seeing anyone. Each question felt harmless on the surface, yet my thoughts tangled around them, tightening with something I didn't want to name. I caught myself watching his hands when he talked. The quiet confidence in his posture. The pauses he took before speaking, like he was choosing his words carefully, for me. At one point, Dad called from work to say he'd be late. Real late. The house seemed to exhale after that. Just Evan and me, the fan clicking overhead, the afternoon stretching long and undefined. I told myself nothing was going to happen. But when Evan smiled at me, slow, knowing, almost curious, I wondered if he saw the questions I was afraid to ask. And more dangerously, if he was waiting for me to ask them first. Evan stayed. One night turned into 3. Then a week. Dad worked late almost every evening, his absence explained away by overtime and half-hearted apologies over the phone. I told myself it was coincidence. I told myself not to read meaning into the quiet. But the house noticed. Morning light spilled through the curtains at a softer angle now, dust motes drifting lazily as if they had nowhere else to be. Evan woke early, always before me. I'd hear him moving downstairs, mugs clinking, the low hum of the kettle, the back door opening to let in air that smelled like cut grass and asphalt warming under the sun. I started waking up on purpose, just to listen. When I joined him, he'd smile like it was nothing. Like he hadn't already been there for hours, occupying the house in a way that felt intimate and wrong all at once. You're up early for a college kid, he teased one morning. Could say the same for you, I replied, and the way his smile lingered afterward stayed with me longer than it should have. We talked a lot, about everything and nothing. He asked about my childhood memories of him, laughed when I told him I used to think he was invincible. I noticed how carefully he listened, how his eyes didn't wander when I spoke. It made me feel chosen, seen, and that scared me. Sometimes he'd help around the house. Fix a loose hinge, replace a light bulb Dad had ignored for months. Each small task felt loaded with meaning, as if he were quietly proving something, his usefulness, his presence, his permanence. One afternoon, thunderclouds rolled in without warning. The sky darkened, heavy and low, pressing down on the roof until the house felt smaller. The power flickered once, twice, then went out. The sudden silence made my ears ring. Evan was in the hallway, close enough that I could smell soap and rain on his clothes. He chuckled lightly, like this kind of thing didn't unsettle him. "Looks like we're old school for a bit," he said. We lit candles. The house glowed in uneven patches of gold, shadows stretching and bending into unfamiliar shapes. I told myself my nerves were from the storm, from the claustrophobic dark. But when Evan brushed past me, his arm grazing mine, my breath hitched. I hated how aware I was of him then, of the space he occupied, of how every sound, the creak of the floor, the roll of thunder, felt amplified. We sat in the living room, rain hammering against the windows. Evan leaned back, relaxed, legs stretched out like he belonged there. Like he'd always belonged there. "You've grown up," he said suddenly, his voice softer than before. The words landed heavier than they should have. "So have you," I replied, immediately wishing I hadn't. He laughed, low and quiet. "Fair enough." Silence followed. Not awkward, charged. I wondered if he noticed the way my hands fidgeted. If he could hear my heart pounding over the storm. If he was thinking about the same unspoken thing I was trying desperately to ignore. When the lights came back on, the moment shattered. Relief and disappointment hit me at the same time. That night, I lay awake replaying every second. Every look. Every pause that lingered just a fraction too long. Why did it feel like we were circling something dangerous? The next few days pushed closer to that edge. Evan started asking more personal questions. About my relationships. About what I wanted after graduation. About whether I felt stuck. "You don't seem like someone who fits into small spaces," he said once, watching me over his coffee. Neither did he. I noticed how often he found reasons to be near me. Passing me in the hallway. Sitting beside me on the couch instead of across. Standing just a little too close when he explained something. Each time, I told myself to step back. Each time, I didn't. Dad's absence grew louder. He missed dinner twice in 1 week. When he was home, he seemed tired, distracted, unaware of the undercurrent building beneath his roof. Evan and I exchanged glances over the table, quick, unreadable. It felt like a secret we hadn't agreed to keep, but were keeping anyway. One evening, Dad left again, keys jangling with forced cheer. The door closed behind him with a hollow sound that echoed through the house. Evan exhaled slowly. "Just us," he said, not looking at me. My stomach tightened. We watched a movie neither of us followed. The room was dim, the TV casting shifting light across Evan's face. I kept telling myself to focus on the screen, but my attention kept drifting, to the way his jaw tensed when he concentrated, to how his knee brushed mine and didn't move away. I didn't move either. The contact felt electric, dangerous, like crossing a line without stepping anywhere at all. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. I nodded too fast. "Yeah." He studied me for a long moment. Too long. Then he leaned back, creating space I hadn't realized I was holding onto. The loss of warmth felt abrupt, almost painful. Later, I went to the kitchen for water. Evan followed, leaning against the counter while I filled the glass. The silence between us stretched, thick and undeniable. "You know," he said slowly, "sometimes people assume they know who we are. What we're supposed to want." My hand tightened around the glass. "Yeah," I whispered, "but that doesn't always match what's inside," he continued. His eyes flicked to mine, searching, testing. The room felt suddenly too small, too honest. Before I could respond, a noise cut through the moment, a knock at the door. Sharp, unexpected. We froze. Evan straightened, his expression unreadable. I moved toward the door, heart racing, only to find no one there. Just the porch light buzzing softly, insects swirling in its glow. When I turned back, Evan was watching me like I'd just crossed some invisible threshold. "Probably nothing," he said. But neither of us believed that. That night, I dreamed of standing at the edge of something vast and dark, Evan beside me, close enough to feel but not touch. I woke with my heart racing, the question echoing in my head long after the sun rose. How far could we go before there was no turning back? And did he already know the answer? Dad left after dinner again, phone pressed to his ear. promising he wouldn't be late. The door closed with a soft, final click that echoed louder than it should have. I stood in the hallway longer than necessary, listening to his truck fade into the distance, feeling the house settle around us. Just Evan and me. The air felt heavier than usual, thick with something unspoken. Outside, cicadas screamed from the trees, their rhythm relentless, almost frantic. Inside, the lights hummed softly, casting a warm glow that made shadows cling to the corners. Evan poured himself a drink at the counter. He didn't offer me one. That should have been my first warning. "You okay?" he asked, not turning around. I hesitated. "Yeah, just tired." A lie, or maybe only part of the truth. He nodded slowly, like he heard what I wasn't saying. "You've been quiet today." I shrugged, staring at the floor. "Haven't slept much." He finally turned to face me. There was something different in his expression, less casual, more focused. Like a decision had been made somewhere behind his eyes. "Mind if we talk?" he asked. My chest tightened. "About what?" "Us," he said simply. The word landed between us, fragile and dangerous. I laughed under my breath, too sharp. "There is no us." Evan didn't smile. "That's not what it feels like." Silence rushed in, filling every crack. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and uneven. "This isn't a good idea," I said quickly, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "You're my dad's friend. You're older," he finished, not unkindly. "I know. And it would mess everything up," I added, my voice shaking despite my effort to sound calm. "Him, me, you." Evan set his glass down carefully, like sudden movements might break something delicate. "I haven't touched you," he said. "I haven't crossed any lines. Not physically," my mind whispered. "But you've been standing on 'em," he continued. "So have I." I swallowed hard. The truth in his words burned. "I didn't plan this," he said quietly. "I came here to help your dad. To get some space. I didn't expect," he trailed off, searching my face. "You. That did it. That cracked something open. You don't get to say that like it's nothing," I snapped. "Like I'm not the one who has to live here. Like I won't be the one dealing with the fallout." His jaw tightened. Guilt flickered across his face, sharp and real. "You think I don't know that?" The room felt too small. I moved toward the living room, needing distance, but Evan followed, stopping just short of touching me. The space between us hummed. "I've been trying to keep my distance," he said. "I really have." "Then do it," I shot back. "Leave." The word hung there, trembling. Evan stared at me for a long moment. Something unreadable passed through his eyes. "Hurt, maybe. Or resolve. Is that what you want?" he asked. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out, because the truth terrified me. Thunder rolled in the distance, low and ominous. The lights flickered once, plunging the room into brief darkness before stabilizing again. When they came back, Evan was closer. Not by much. Enough to feel his presence like heat. "You don't have to answer," he said softly. "But don't pretend this is one-sided." My breath caught. Every instinct screamed at me to step back. Instead, I stayed where I was. "This is wrong," I whispered. "Yes," he agreed. "It is." The admission felt heavier than denial. We stood there, locked in a moment stretched thin by everything we weren't saying. I noticed the smallest details, the way his hand flexed at his side, like he was holding himself back, the faint crease between his brows, the way his voice dropped when he spoke my name. "Look at me," he said gently. I shouldn't have, but I did. The world narrowed to the space between us. To the questions burning in my chest. To the terrifying realization that being seen like this, truly seen, felt intoxicating. "I don't want to hurt you," Evan said. "Or your dad." "Then stop," I begged, even as my body betrayed me by leaning forward, just slightly. His breath hitched. "You're not making this easy." "I'm not trying to." The honesty shocked us both. For a moment, it felt like the house itself was holding its breath. Waiting. Evan lifted his hand, stopping inches from my arm. He paused there, suspended, giving me time. "A choice. Tell me to walk away," he said. "And I will." My heart pounded so hard it hurt. If I said it, everything would snap back into place. The world would make sense again. but the silence stretched. I didn't say it. Evan let his hand fall, not touching me, but the loss of that almost contact sent a shiver through me. He stepped back, creating space that felt suddenly unbearable. "This can't go any further," he said, voice rough. "Not like this." Relief and regret crashed into me at the same time. Then headlights swept across the living room walls. We both froze. A car door slammed outside. "Dad." Evan's expression changed instantly, guilt rushing in like a tide. He ran a hand through his hair, stepping farther away from me as if distance could erase what had just happened. The front door opened. Dad's voice filled the house, casual, unaware. "Hey, I'm home." Evan glanced at me one last time. His eyes held a question I wasn't ready to answer, and a warning I couldn't ignore. As Dad walked into the room, smiling, I realized something irreversible had already occurred. Nothing had happened, and yet, everything had. And the worst part, I had no idea which of us would break first, not in any obvious way. The walls didn't shift. The furniture stayed where it had always been. Dad still drank his coffee at the counter every morning, still complained about work, still laughed at the same tired jokes. But everything underneath felt unstable. Like a floorboard you don't notice is loose until you put weight on it. Evan became careful. Too careful. He kept his distance now, measured steps, polite smiles, conversations routed through Dad whenever possible. The casual ease he'd worn before was gone, replaced by something restrained and brittle. When our eyes met, he looked away first. That hurt more than I expected. I told myself it was for the best. That distance meant safety. That restraint meant control. But at night, lying in my childhood bed, I replayed that moment over and over, the almost touch, the choice I never made, the way his voice had dropped when he said my name. Nothing had happened, yet my body remembered it like it had. The silence between us grew loud, heavy. When we were alone in a room, it felt like standing too close to a fault line. We spoke about neutral things, the weather, errands, Dad's schedule, but every word felt like it was stepping around something dangerous. Sometimes I caught Evan watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. His expression unreadable, not desire exactly, something more conflicted, protective, regretful. That look scared me. One afternoon, Dad didn't come home at all. A late call turned into a text, then nothing. The sky darkened early, clouds rolling in thick and low. The air smelled like rain that hadn't decided whether to fall. Evan and I sat at opposite ends of the living room, the TV on but muted. The ticking of the clock filled the space between us. "I'll check on him," Evan said finally, standing. "You don't have to," I replied too quickly. He paused, hand on the back of the chair. "I know," but he didn't sit back down. Instead, he walked toward the door, then stopped. Turned, looked at me in a way that made my chest tighten. "We should talk," he said quietly. My pulse spiked. "About what?" "About setting boundaries," he answered. "Real ones." I nodded, though my throat felt tight. "Okay." He didn't move closer, didn't sit. He stayed exactly where he was, as if distance itself were a rule he was forcing himself to follow. "I care about you," Evan said. The words were steady, but his jaw was tense. That's the problem. The honesty landed like a blow. "You can't," I said, guilt flooding in. "You shouldn't." "I know," he said again. "And that's why this ends here." Ends. The word echoed in my head. I should have felt relieved. Instead, something hollow opened in my chest. "And Dad?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Does he know?" Evan shook his head immediately. "No, and he never will." The certainty in his tone unsettled me. Like he'd already decided the cost. A rumble of thunder rolled overhead, closer this time. The lights flickered once, briefly dimming the room. In that momentary shadow, Evan's face looked older. "Tired. I'm leaving tomorrow," he added. "Tomorrow." I stood abruptly, the movement sharp. "You said you were staying another week." I changed my mind. The finality in his voice left no room for argument. Silence stretched between us again, thick with everything we couldn't undo. I wanted to say something, to protest, to confess, to ask him not to go, but every word felt dangerous. So I said nothing. Evan nodded once, like he'd expected that. Like he was grateful for it. Later that night, rain finally came. Heavy, unrelenting. I lay awake listening to it pound the roof, wondering if he was awake too. Wondering if he was replaying the same almost moments. Wondering if leaving was his way of saving us, or himself. Just before dawn, I heard a sound in the hallway. Soft footsteps. A pause outside my door. My heart stopped. The handle didn't turn. After a moment, the steps retreated. In the morning, Evan's suitcase was gone. Dad said he'd left early for work. Too early for goodbyes. I stood in the empty hallway, staring at the space where he'd been, my thoughts spiraling. Was this really the end? Or just the moment before everything came crashing down? The house never felt emptier than it did after Evan left. Not because he'd taken up space, he hadn't, not really, but because something invisible had gone with him. A tension, a possibility, a question that had wrapped itself around every quiet moment and refused to let go. Dad noticed the change before I did. "You okay?" he asked one evening, watching me poke at my dinner. "You've been distracted lately." I forced a smile. "Just tired." The lie came too easily now. Dad nodded, accepting it the way parents sometimes do when they don't want to push too hard. He mentioned Evan once or twice, how work had called him back unexpectedly, how they'd catch up soon. Each time, my stomach tightened, but I kept my face neutral. Evan never called. Days turned into weeks. Summer stretched on, slow and heavy. I went back to my routines, errands, friends, late night scrolling, but everything felt muted, like I was watching my own life from behind glass. At night, I replayed that final morning. The footsteps. The pause outside my door. The choice he didn't make, or maybe the one he did. I told myself his leaving was proof of control, of boundaries, of doing the right thing. So why did it feel like unfinished business? One afternoon, a package arrived. No return address. Just my name, written carefully in handwriting I recognized instantly. My hands shook as I carried it to my room. Inside was a book, an old one, dog-eared, annotated, Evans. On the inside cover, a note was tucked neatly between the pages. Some things teach us who we are. Some things remind us who we're not ready to be yet. No signature, just that. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, staring at the words until they blurred. Was this an apology, a warning, or an invitation I wasn't supposed to accept? That night, Dad mentioned Evan again, casually, like it meant nothing. He might stop by next month, he said. Just passing through. My heart lurched. I kept my voice steady. Oh, Dad didn't notice, or pretended not to. Later, alone in the dark, I opened the book. Margins filled with Evan's thoughts. His questions, his doubts. Lines under passages about restraint, about temptation, about choosing silence over truth. And tucked near the end, another folded page. A date, a place, no explanation. Was it a coincidence, or was he waiting to see if I'd show up? I closed the book, my mind racing. Every instinct told me this was dangerous. That reopening this door would lead somewhere I couldn't control. But another part of me, the one that had stood still when I should have spoken, whispered that some stories don't end just because we walk away. As sleep refused to come, one question echoed louder than the rest. If he was offering me a choice now, would I finally be brave enough to make it? Or was this where the line should stay, drawn, untouched, and haunting us both forever? The house always felt different in the early mornings. Before the city woke up. Before traffic noise crept in through the windows. Before my father's voice filled the rooms with casual authority. At that hour, the walls seemed to breathe, releasing years of trapped heat and memory. The floorboards creaked softly, like they were whispering secrets to themselves. That was how the summer began. I had come back home telling myself it was temporary. Just a break, just a pause before real life started again. But lying in my childhood bed, staring at the familiar crack in the ceiling, I felt like I'd stepped backward into a version of myself I didn't fully recognize anymore. Outside, the air was thick and warm. A ceiling fan clicked overhead, struggling against the heat. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once, then went quiet. Dad had already left for work. His truck was gone from the driveway, the gravel still disturbed where the tires had been. Normally, That sound was my cue to get up. That morning, something kept me frozen in place. Then I heard it. Movement. Footsteps downstairs. Slow. Controlled. Not hurried. Not careless. I told myself it was nothing. The house had always made noises, pipes, wood, the wind slipping through gaps we never bothered to fix. Still, my chest tightened as I sat up, listening. A low clink. Ceramic against ceramic. Coffee cups. I didn't call out. I dressed quietly and moved down the hall, my bare feet brushing against the cool floor. The smell hit me first. Strong coffee, darker than what my father usually drank. Familiar in a way that made my stomach turn. He was standing in the kitchen like he belonged there. Evan, my dad's friend, his closest one, the man who'd been around my entire life without ever feeling like family. Tall, calm, older in a way that carried weight instead of age. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching the silver at his temples as he turned toward me. Morning, he said easily. Something about the way he said it, like this wasn't strange at all, made my pulse jump. I nodded, suddenly too aware of myself, of my posture, of the thin fabric of my shirt, of the fact that we were alone in a house that usually felt too full. Your dad said I could crash here for a bit, Evan added, lifting his mug. Work's got me in town. Dad hadn't mentioned it. That realization settled deep in my chest. We talked like everything was normal. Weather, traffic, how long I'd be home. His voice was steady, unassuming, but his eyes lingered longer than they should have. Or maybe I only noticed because I was already on edge. I told myself this was harmless. But as the morning stretched on, the silence between conversations felt charged. Like something unseen had entered the room and refused to leave. When Evan smiled at me, slow, thoughtful, unreadable, I felt a question form in my mind that scared me with its clarity. Was he just visiting, or had something already been set in motion the moment I heard those footsteps and didn't call out? And if this was the beginning, how was I supposed to know where the line was before I crossed it?